African Americans have a rich history both in Louisiana, Florida parishes history and Americans history. What are some of the stories? Who are some of the people? What is unique about those stories and people? Let's find out. This live stream Zoom session will explore the history of African Americans in the Louisiana, Florida parishes. On the third Tuesday of each month at 7 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time, I will choose a different topic and invite special guests to explore the rich history of African Americans in the Louisiana, Florida parishes. Good evening. I am so excited. I just can't tell you all how excited I am. But let me just tell you what this new Zoom session is all about. And thank you for joining me this afternoon. This live stream Zoom session will explore the history of African Americans in the Florida parishes. On the third Tuesday of each month at 7 o'clock Central Standard Time, I will choose a different topic and invite guests to explore the rich history, the culture, food, music of African Americans in the Florida parishes. African Americans have a rich history in Florida, in the Florida parishes, and that history is so undocumented that this show will bring to you so many of those undocumented stories. What are some of the stories? Who are some of the people? What is so unique about these stories and people? Let's find out. I am so excited to really talk about how this person that I have invited tonight she is just a remarkable person. But let me tell you something about Bernice. Bernice Alexander Bennett is an award-winning author, genealogist, nationally recognized guest speaker, storyteller, producer, and host of the popular show Research at the National Archives and Beyond Blog Talk Radio program. She's also the first recipient of the Ida B. Wells Service Award given by the sons and daughters of United States Middle Passage for her dedication to the broadcast stories about enslaved and indentured slave ancestors of the African descent. She also received the Elizabeth Clark Lewis Afro-American Historical Genealogy Society Award in 2019 for original research in the support of African American genealogy. Bennett is on the board of directors for the National Genealogical Society. Her genealogical research center on the Southeast Louisiana and also on Edgefield and Greenwood counties, South Carolina. Her South Carolina journey is chronicled in Our Ancestors, Our Story, which won another award in 2018, the International Hogs Book Award for Nonfiction Short Stories. Her second book, wow, she has been really busy, Tracing Their Steps, a memoir received the Phyllis Wheatley Literary Award from the Sons and Daughters of the Book Award in 2020 for nonfiction short stories, and the Next Generation Indie Awards in 2021 for African Americans nonfiction book category, and a semifinalist in 2021 for the Winning Writers Book Award. Congratulations to you, Bernice. Bernice, you have been so busy.
Yes, I have.
It's an honor to have you and to have you talk about something special tonight. And I just want to pull that up because Bernice, you helped me so much. I can't begin to tell you. I learned so much from you about the homesteaders. So tonight we'll be talking to Bernice to explore the Louisiana, Florida parishes, African American history, Black homesteaders in the Louisiana, Florida parishes. Bernice, we welcome you on this segment tonight to educate us.
Well, I want to thank you for inviting me. And I look forward to just sharing with you information about the Black homesteaders of the Florida parishes, something that we haven't really talked about a lot. So I hope that those of you who are listening will learn about the homesteaders.
All right, Bernice. So I have given you control to share your presentation, and please, we're in your classroom now.
Thank you very much. Okay, as Antoinette mentioned, I will be discussing the Black homesteaders in the Louisiana, Florida parishes. Now, one thing that I do want you all to see and to understand is where, just where are we talking about? Where is the Florida parishes? Well, think about this and just look at the location of where these Florida parishes are. They're right here in Southeast Louisiana. Now, the area of Louisiana known as the Florida parishes has lived under Choctaw, French from 1717 to 1763, British from 1763 to 1779, and Spanish from 1779 to 1810 rule. And in 1810, this region was annexed by the United States, but not before a brief existence, exactly 74 days, as the independent Republic of West Florida. Hence, this is why these parishes are called the Florida parishes. Now, many of you have probably heard of Orleans Parish or the River parishes, or you've gone all the way up north. But we're talking about this section right here that includes St. Helena, St. Tammany, Washington, East Feliciana, West Feliciana, Livingston, Tangipahoa, and East Baton Rouge. And this map will show you the areas that I am speaking of. And here is Orleans right here. And of course, you do have Lake Pontchartrain and the Mississippi. So what I will be doing today is going over what the Homestead Act of 1862 is, the eligibility requirements, the application process, what you can learn from land entry papers, what is a land patent, and who are the descendants of African American homesteaders. So let me just start off with the actual act. The Homestead Act was actually passed in 1862 by Abraham Lincoln, and it went into effect January 1st, 1863. Now we're talking about public land, okay? So to obtain this public land, there's certain requirements. First of all, you should never take up arms against the United States. Former slaves and women could file. You had to show evidence of improvements and had to be over the age of 21. Now, with this application process, the applicant had to settle on the land, of course, file an application, as I said earlier, and prove the land, and then file for a patent. Now, when you look at this map, just think about this. All of this land that's in brown, that's public land. That's homestead land. So that means we're excluding the state of Texas and the 13 original colonies. And of course, here is Louisiana. Someone said to me today, I had no idea that Louisiana was a public land state. Well, yes. So let's talk about the goals of the Homestead Act of 1862. They had two main goals: to assist the government in selling off its land to ordinary citizens and to use the land in what they considered to be an economically efficient manner. Now, there was also another act, and this act was after the Civil War, and it was called the Southern Homestead Act. It was enacted June 21st, 1866. And this act opened up 46 million acres of land And the thought at that time was that this land would go to formerly enslaved individuals and poor whites. The states included Louisiana, Mississippi, Arkansas, Florida, and Alabama. The problem with this act, however, is that it was poorly administered. However, it did not mean that those states went away and no public land was available, because it still was there under the original Homestead Act of 1862. So this act was repealed July 4th, 1876. So what did it take? Think about this for a minute. There's public land and you want that land, but you also needed resources. The resources included farm tools. How are you going to, improve the land without having farm tools? You needed money, because for every application that was filed, there had to be a small transaction fee. And then you needed community support. Other people could come in, let's say, and help you. So this is what it took. So when I mention land patents, patents are the legal documents that transfer the land from ownership from the United States government to individuals, okay? So this was the goal to obtain this patent. But how do you even know that you are a descendant of a homesteader? Well, for some of you, you may have grown up hearing through oral history that your family owned land. Some of you may have lived on or visited the land. And then perhaps a large number of you discovered this land through your own genealogical research. And so I want to just put this image up, because this is what a land patent looks like. This patent came from the Bureau of Land Management, and you may even see this patent if you have an account with Ancestry.com. You might see a land patent show up with one of your relatives. So I mentioned the Bureau of Land Management. Well, this is a site that actually has the information that you need to determine if your ancestor owned land. So let me start off with this story. This is my great-great-grandfather, Peter Clark. He's sitting, and standing next to Peter Clark is his son, Moses. So I looked at the Bureau of Land Management, and I knew where he was from, Livingston Parish. And I put his name in to see if I would find information that would confirm Peter Clark owned land. The same thing that you could do if you know who your ancestor is and where they're from. And indeed, here his name showed up. Here's Peter Clark. He obtained land in 1896. So with that information, okay, 1896 meant that maybe he should, or I expected to see him in the 1900 census owning land. And indeed, it's the case. He is a farmer. He owns his land, as you can see the O, and he reads, writes, and speaks English. And here are the names of others in the household, including my grandmother, Rebecca. In fact, she is the one that told me that her grandfather owned a lot of land. So I got that information from a reliable source. So I just shared with you the fact that you could find the patent, you could find information, but remember, think about this. If you get a patent, that means that you have already gone through a process. So what you will need now is to obtain the application, the land entry case files. I mean, that's your key. to finding out more about how this ancestor or your ancestor acquired land. That information is at the National Archives. Can you imagine going to the National Archives and giving them the information that you obtained from the Bureau of Land Management, and they bring you this box of records? And you go through this box of records until you find the certificate number and the application number.
I have a question for you.
Documents that have not been opened in over 130 to 40 years. Yes, Antoinette.
Bernice, I'm looking at this box. And is there an index for this box?
No, there isn't an index.
So you have to pull each one of these folders of records and read them according to the number that's on the front.
That's right. You're going through each packet, because they are a packet. The records are in a packet. You're going through each of these until you find the numbers that you're looking for.
Oh my goodness.
Somebody has to do this, right?
And when you said it hasn't been open in 100 years, so that means that some of these records are dusty, some could be, and you just, oh my goodness.
Not only that, but if you look at, this is a record right here. I'm just holding it. So that's one record. Look at that.
So you have to read every one of those documents.
You have to open them up. Let me tell you what's interesting about this. Okay, you open them up to scan them. Guess what happens? They close back up on you because they hadn't been open in a long time.
Wow.
And you have to put weights on them to keep them open.
And Bernice, when you are scanning, and if it's a story, you need to scan make a copy of every page.
Absolutely. You have to. That's the only way you can get the full application. You have to scan each page separately.
There must be thousands of boxes like that. One box that you showed us.
Oh, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. But the key is to first go to the Bureau of Land Management, and on that document at the Bureau of Land Management, you will find out the land office.
Mm-hmm.
You will find, as I mentioned, the application number and the certificate number. That information then allows the people at the National Archives to pull the correct box of records for you.
Okay.
And then once you get that, you then have to go through and find the one that you're looking at.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So this is what Peter Clark's, this is what his folder looked like. This is his original folder. And I can tell you, when I originally got this folder, I mean, I had chills. I could not believe it, that I was actually going to touch the papers that my ancestor touched back in 1887. Okay.
And had to sign. That was just, yeah.
Okay. And really, he's dictating his information. Somebody else is writing this.
Mm-hmm. But he had to sign it.
Yes, indeed. And you see this amount of money down here?
Mm-hmm.
That's the fee. So you will see on, various transactions, whenever he had to go to New Orleans, he had to pay a fee. And some of his information had to be notarized. Well,
is that $18?
That's Can you imagine $18
back in that time?
Yes.
Yeah, 1887. That may as well have been $850.
It's a lot of money.
A lot of money.
A lot of money, right? And so with his application, this is the thing that you'll start seeing. First of all, I know he was born. I mean, here it is. I'm a native citizen of the United States. I'm over the age of 21 years and head of the family. You are going to see this document. Mm-hmm. There's also a questionnaire. And that questionnaire is in most of the packets that you will find. So I know he was born in Louisiana. Here he is. I'm born in Louisiana. They ask him, what is your name, your age, your post office? Peter Clark, 38 years old. Marpont, Louisiana. That's in Livingston Parish. That's one of the Florida parishes, folks. Then you'll get an idea of just what did he do? You know, when was your house built? My house was built and I established actual residence on the land over 10 years ago. You know, we talk about, oh, we don't have the 1890 census. Well, here's somebody telling me where he was basically in 1890 because he put in that application in 1887. And so he had a dwelling, an outhouse, 5 acres of land that he fenced and cleared. The total value, $105. Every land entry packet will have information about the settler. And as you can see, he put down there, of whom does your family consist of? My wife and 4 children. And we've lived on there continuously since first establishing residence. And then it just goes on and on. You know, piney woods, most valuable for farming when cleared, that he cleared 5 acres for 10 years. So you see all of that information. At the end, signed plainly with full Christian name, Peter Hismark Clark. That's what he put down there. Although the census said he could read, write, and speak English, he did sign with an X. Now comes the really good part. I mean, it's all good, but now he has to go back and he has to then identify individuals that will serve as his witnesses. You see, they have to then attest to the fact that he did what he was supposed to do, that he was in compliance with the requirements of the Homestead Act. So then you start getting names of his neighbors and friends: Marshall Douglas, Charles Baptiste, Henry Tinkshell, Alfred Robinson, and Ida and Robert Benefield. But it's even more exciting because there's also in this packet a notice for publication. You see, this information had to be placed in the newspaper. You might have some people that will contest it. So you will find a notice for publication and even the name of the newspaper, the Southfield newspaper. And all of the people are here. And this is the exciting part. You might not find anything like this unless you start looking for your ancestor and if they indeed acquired land. Then you start finding another part of their lives and who they interacted with. Well, I started thinking, I wonder if some of those individuals that served as witnesses were also African American. And I discovered that Charlie Baptiste, Alfred Robinson, and Henry Tinkshell, also homesteaders, were also African American.
Was they in St. Helena?
They were there in Livingston Parish.
Okay.
All of those were his witnesses out of Livingston Parish.
I saw something that said St. Helena and I was wondering.
Well, because what you're seeing is something that's called the meridian. And that's what it is. It's the St. Helena meridian. That is the geographic way of which they are describing the area.
Okay.
That's why you will see St. Helena. But if you go further to the right, you see Livingston. Now, this is one part that almost broke my heart. Because one of the things that I said to you is that Peter Clark had to go to New Orleans. That's where the land office was located. Now, I know in St. Helena, there was a Greensboro land office. In fact, when you go to the courthouse, you see it, that little white building. But these individuals had to go to New Orleans. And Peter Clark didn't have the money. And he stated that he's a very poor man. And until today, he has not been able to get the money to pay the cost of making the proof. Can you imagine living on land for 10 years and not have the money to go for the final document? I mean, the final one. So he eventually did get the money, and he went to the land office, and yes, he did get his land patent. And this is what the original land patent looks like. This
Amazing.
patent is in the hands of one of my cousins, and she gave me a copy of this patent, which I would hope that when they got those patents, they framed them, because those patents meant so much. Think about someone, this man was born in 1855,
Mm-hmm.
before the Civil War. And so if I wanted to, I would say from enslavement to land ownership. But this was a big deal to get 159.33 acres
Wow.
of land. Now, what is even more exciting is to see him in the register. Here is his name. He is in the final certificate register. So, there's no doubt that Peter Clarkson did get his land. It is registered in the land office. So let's talk about who in the Florida parishes have we found other individuals. Well, in St. Helena Parish, we have Henry and Julia Gordon, Andrew Richardson. Tangipahoa Parish, Moses Broomfield and Fred Broomfield. Livingston Parish, as you can see, several individuals have been identified in Livingston Parish. Washington Parish, Moses Dyson and LeBron Brock. And then East Feliciana, Moses Singleton and John Turner. And St. Tammany, Josiah Cyprian and James Cyprian. And what's interesting about Josiah is Josiah was also in the United States Colored Troops.
Oh, wow. This is amazing.
Yes, so I'm so excited because I actually have Josiah's pension records.
I was about to ask you, did you pull any of his?
I did. Amazing pictures.
Wow.
Now, let me tell you all why I know about these people. First of all, this is what was in the newspaper for Josiah, folks. And you could see who served as his witnesses: B. Nell, Emil Baham, Robert Brown, and Tom Cyprian. But what's also exciting, have any of you heard of this name, Walter L. Cohen?
Yes, I have.
Okay, there's Cohen School.
School in New Orleans.
You also know that Cohen was the first African-American register of land in New Orleans. So what do these stories tell us? Now, I name these people because stories are being written about these individuals, and they're being written for placement on the National Park Service's website. And what we know and what we learn from some of these stories is that some of these individuals were formerly enslaved, that some were widows with children, and we also learn about the communities that they live in. So let's start off with our first story. This is what it looks like on the National Park Service website. And Antoinette, do you want to say something about this story? How did this story come about?
Yes, this is so beautiful because a lady named Patsy Zanders Johnson came over, and I knew that she had connections to the Broomfield family. And when she came over to drop off her funeral program collection, I said, Patsy, I would like to introduce you to someone. And let me just call Bernice and see if she's available. So I call you. I said, Bernice, I have somebody I want you to meet. And I introduced you all, and we're on the speakerphone. And when she told you that she was a Broomfield, you started talking more and more and more. And before you know it, you find out right there that her ancestor was a homesteader. That
I mean,
was just
how quick, I mean, really, it's one of these things that if you don't even ask the question or you
right.
don't even start looking, you'll never know. But this came about from a conversation
What
on
about?
the telephone. And so, of course, what happened next? We found his land entry papers. They were at the National Archives. And he did acquire 82.93 acres of land
That
in
was a lot of
Washington
land. That
Parish.
was a lot
That's
of
right.
land.
That's right. And so it was just so exciting to actually talk to someone on the phone that had never seen these land entry papers. They were ordered from the National Archives, and this story is now on the Homestead National Historical Park website.
And the
Well,
family is so excited, Bernice.
well, I'm happy for the family. In fact, I celebrate any story that goes up. I
Yeah.
celebrate because for so long, people didn't even realize that you had African American homesteaders in the South.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so while we're just looking at the Florida parishes, we have to think about the entire state of Louisiana. There are
Mm-hmm.
homesteaders on this website from the Natchitoches area, Bossier Parish, Claiborne Parish, and there are many, many more. But you won't know until you look, until you start
Mm-hmm.
asking those questions. When I went home, let's say if I went home to visit somebody and they live, quote, in the country, but they were
Mm-hmm.
on their own land, how did they get that land? Were they homesteaders? Did they buy that land? This is something that you have to start asking yourself.
Mm-hmm. Bernice, can you go over the quick facts to tell people what that is and why is it so important to each individual story?
Well, first of all, each story, you're actually going back and you're making history. You're making history come alive
Mm-hmm.
because homestead land, as I said, that's public land. And that's public land that we had an opportunity to get. And when you start looking at the census records, or even looking at the Freedmen Bureau records, you might find your ancestor. You may have heard this whole notion that we expected to get our 40 acres and a mule. Many people didn't get their 40 acres and a mule. They didn't get any land. They sharecropped that land. But you also had other folks that were watching and paying attention and taking that step forward to get that land. So this is really significant to anybody that took that journey. I mean, just look at this one. Moses Singleton was born in 1840. 1840, and he received his patent in 1907. So he was a farmer at 67 years old when he entered his final testimony for his land. Can
Wow.
you imagine? I mean, this was probably one of his dreams to own that land. And he
It was.
did it. He did it, 67 years old. I showed you Peter Clark, he was 38, but this man was 67. And his descendant wrote this story. He had two descendants to write this story. Well, this is another story. This is Leander Youngblood. And he was born in Mississippi in 1857. And once again, this man acquired his land. He put in his application in 1887. And by December 1888, he had made improvements to the land. He obtained 127.20 acres of land. I mean, all of this is something to celebrate, just celebrate. And he was also in Washington Parish. So what you're seeing now is not just Livingston, it's not just Tangipahoa. You're going all over the Florida parishes and finding African Americans that are acquiring land. Now, this is another story. This is Henry and Julia Gordon. And Henry and Julia Gordon did obtain their land in St. Helena Parish, St. Helena. And the documents do show that they were enslaved by the Gormans. And Henry unfortunately passed away, but Julia continued with the process. And she got that land. And so you, as I said earlier, women, you're going to find this. You're going to find that the husband passed away, but the woman is still on top of it. She's not going to let that go away.
That's right. And I'm reading right here where they cultivated 25 of the 35 acres. They built a kitchen, a corn crib, and a stable.
Right.
That was a lot of work.
That's a lot of work. But this is the thing. That information is coming out of the land entry paper. You know, these are primary documents. This is what they are telling them. This is another story. This story just came online Sunday. And so for Moses Dyson, and he was born about 1830. But Moses Dyson managed to get his land.
And it said that
in Washington Parish.
And his two sisters was living with him, two sisters and a niece.
That's right. That's right. And so individuals that are writing these stories, they do a little genealogical research. I mean, it's more than what they're getting out of the land entry papers because they're going through the census. They're finding out about the family, and that information is also included in the stories. And so to help individuals become a part of this, there's a Facebook page called the Descendants of African American Homesteaders. And this page is designed to promote mutual understanding, respect, and knowledge that our ancestors from throughout the United States successfully applied for and received a land patent from the United States. You also see that because individuals have joined this site, they can also request a copy of their land entry files. I have been able to get these files for them. The only requirement I have is that you write a story. And the second requirement is that you make sure 100% certain that this is your ancestor, because obviously none of this information is indexed. Somebody is pulling the file. Individuals are also given a template, how to write your story. You know, just some questions. What is the settler's name? Where is the land located? When did your ancestors settle on the land? And by the way, you don't have to be a descendant. You could just be a contributor. You can be an individual that's just interested in researching the land of African Americans in a specific area. And I welcome that. The whole idea is for these stories to be told. And this template will pretty much guide you through the process. Where was he born? Was his parents enslaved? How many individuals lived with him or her on the homestead? Did he name them? Do you know their names? And, you know, did he sign with his own signature, or did he use the X? And who were the witnesses? And I'll even tell individuals after they've identified those witnesses and they've written that story, what about then following the witnesses? Find out who they are. And if there's a special photo that individuals would like to add to the story, they can do that. And so this is kind of my steps on what I would encourage you all to do. Join the Descendants of African American Homesteaders Facebook group. Once you've done that, go to the Bureau of Land Management to make certain that your ancestor owned land. Then request your land entry papers. write your story using the prompts in the template, and then submit your story. Basically, submit your story to me for publication on the MPS website. And I serve as the liaison to the MPS, the National Park Service, and I will then send your story. And I'll work with you. I mean, I'll work with anyone that needs work and help and support in getting that story published. And so I'm open for any questions that individuals would like to ask.
Bernice, I thank you so much for this very educational and informative presentation, because you have opened my eyes up to looking at homesteaders records. Although I only found one for Andrew, and Andrew, that homestead record helped me to connect the two different Richardsons, as they would say, in this area. I do have a question for you. What became of the land office in New Orleans? Did they make it out of a building? Do you know whatever happened to the land office there?
Well, the land office was on Canal Street. I'm not sure where the land office is right now. But I do know that there is a website where you could search old land records. And I called the land office, because remember, the state knows where the land is. The state, many people ended up, unfortunately, losing that land because of tax purposes. And so you have to also understand and study what's going on in the state. Look at what happened to that land. Some people were able to hold on to that land, but then you have to look at what's happening with the Black farmers and how many of them lost their land. You have to go and study what's happening with the Department of Interior. It's a whole lot of information. And so what we're trying to do now is gather the documentation that, first of all, identifies who those homesteaders are, what they went through, and that in itself is a journey to study. And it's honoring your ancestor for doing something. They didn't just keep that enslaved mentality of somebody has me shackled. Right. When freedom came, they wanted what everybody else had, and that was the dream of land ownership. They wanted education. They wanted jobs. They wanted to be respected as free people. And when you see that land pattern and you see those papers and they're describing what they did to that land, can you imagine the pride? Even some of those land papers will say, I voted. I mean, the pride of saying, I voted. Yeah, I'm a free man.
Yeah. Especially when you think about, a lot of them had just gotten their freedom. You can see it. I mean, that's what those applications tell you. And speaking about the Florida parishes, we're talking about anyone that is from East Baton Rouge Parish, East Feliciana, Livingston, St. Helena, St. Timothy, Tangipahoa, Washington Parish, West Feliciana, and I think I name all of them. So because there's a rich history in all of the Florida parishes, and sometimes they refer to as the North Shore. But I just want to be able to highlight some of that history, and just learn about these land patterns is so important, Bernice, so important. So although I haven't found anyone in my direct family, and the first person I found that owned land on my Harrell side was in 1888. He purchased his land. So I was hoping that I would have found a land pattern. I said, oh, why not me? Why not me?
Hey, finding that he purchases land is just as good as getting the land patent too. And even,
but I would have learned a little bit more.
Right.
I would have learned a little bit more about them.
Yes.
Because it's like you stepped into the past. And Bernice, would you please just sort of elaborate on this for me? people think that genealogy is so important. If it wasn't for genealogy, would you have found these land patents for Peter Clark?
Probably not. I mean, there are a couple of dynamics going on here, and that is that I did have some oral history. But if I wasn't interested, then I
Exactly.
probably would not have even looked for the land.
Mhm.
But because of my interest in genealogy and honoring my ancestors, I found that land.
Mhm.
And then by me finding the land, I want everybody else to find the land too, you know.
So it's
Because he
been
wasn't
a
by
journey.
himself. He wasn't by himself. And this is the one thing that I think is very important for people to understand. If you have one person getting it, he has support from somebody else. Who
Mhm.
are those people? Are those people also doing the same thing? Are they also applying for land? Is he a witness for them as they were witnesses for him? You have a wonderful journey to go through. And by experiencing that journey of your ancestors, you're able to see that big story of how those communities came together.
And I saw that some of the people who was a witness for Peter Clark, they in turn was on land themselves. They own a patent.
That's right, they did.
Yeah. Mhm.
And that was just such a wonderful experience to then start tracking them. You start following those witnesses and you notice that they're living near each other. So it could be just a whole cluster of individuals, which then tells you it's time to do community research.
Well, I know the National Park Service is really happy for all your contributions to to enlighten them on some of the homeowners, the Black homesteaders.
Yes, and there was a goal to have 50 stories. And I can tell you those stories are coming from everywhere. We have beautiful stories from Nebraska, Michigan, Kansas, Mississippi, Arkansas, Alabama, Florida. I mean, I can name them because I've read every single story, but there are a lot more out there. I think that the more the word gets out, and I want to thank you for inviting me because I want to be the Pied Piper. I want to go out and I want to sing the song and have the folks
Well, you've
follow
been singing a song.
I've been singing the song. But
You've
for
been singing
every,
a song since I met you.
right, you're right about that, huh? But
Yeah.
the exciting thing though is for every descendant to write a story,
Right.
they can turn around and go sing the story, sing it too,
Yeah.
and get others to do the same thing. I'd love to see the folks in Alabama go out and get others to find land. Just as we're talking about the Florida parishes, which is one pocket in
Yes.
Louisiana, Southeast Louisiana. But
Mhm.
think about the people up there in Claiborne Parish.
In northern parts of
That's
Louisiana.
right. And they also acquired land. And I know who they are because I've seen the records. So we need to see stories like this being shared all over the United States.
And Bernice, this is very important because when you think about, like you said, when those shackles came off, the dreams that they dreamed, they started to work towards those dreams. And it goes to show you that, like you said earlier, where they get the money to buy the tools that it took to cut everything, to cultivate everything. It wasn't any electric, nothing. They had to do it all by hand. And it was teamwork. It was the family working together. It was the neighbors working to help. And that's how they did it. And so that should teach us something today, because there is less young people buying homes. They may be buying homes, but they're not buying land. You see, because look at all of those land patents: 152 acres, 82 acres, 79 acres. And if you think about 152 acres in today's time, and to go back to that, we owned, as African Americans in this country, we owned 15.5 million acres in 1900. we're less than 1.2 million, because I feel like if we continue to build up on the legacy that our ancestors left for us with the land, we would have a lot of land still in our families today.
We would. You're right about that. You are so right. But you talk about that dream, and I've looked in the 1870 census, and when you just look at a family, and you'll see, and I have one of my families, my ancestor is listed in 1870 census as a farmer, and what is his wife listed as? She's keeping house. And then you have the children, they're in school. I mean, it's doing exactly what freedom is supposed to do. And owning that land, I just know that to own that land meant everything to them. And if there's a group of people that really could talk about the value of land, they were brought here to do what? To take care of somebody else's land.
Yes.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. And they just wanted a little piece of the pie for themselves.
Just a little piece.
And for their families and their children. And that was their dreams. That was their dreams. One day I'm gonna own my own land. One day I'm gonna own my own land, and that I can visualize that. And they want to give the next generation something to build on. Absolutely. And so we can learn from those lessons. We can learn from those patterns. It as a lesson in there. Okay, what do we own today? If they did this, and it was alleged they couldn't read and couldn't write, so they said, if they did that with so little, and we are making, look, 10 times more than what they're making, $17. I mean, a child will spend that just going into the store, 2 items and you're done. And that $17, that $18 that Peter Clark had to pay, that was like a life savings of everybody putting that penny in the can.
That's right. That's right, because that was a lot of money. That was a lot of money. But that goal, to achieve that goal of land ownership, he had to do something.
It was worth it. It
was worth every penny. It was worth it. And just to think that he almost lost that dream because he didn't have the money to get back to New Orleans.
To New Orleans, yeah. Now, when you think about it, for them at that time, although they was faced with this hardship, but he was farming the land. And so that money, they were sacrificing at that time a pound of coffee, a pair of shoes, or some type of tool that they needed, but they had food because they was growing their own food. But that was still a hard nickel to come by.
It was. And so you can't help but feel that you're standing on the shoulders of greatness when you think that a person, and I'll go back to, some of those folks, they were born much earlier than Peter Clark. The man who got his land at the age of 67, but he got his land.
Bernice, when you first started and your mother passed this story on to you, did you ever see this day that you would be doing what you're doing now? You done wrote 2 books, you are speaking on this topic, all over the United States. Did you ever imagine that just your own research would take you to where you are now?
No, I can't exactly say that I had the vision to say where I would be today, but obviously it's where I'm supposed to be.
And you followed your passion.
Yes. I love it. I couldn't think of any. I mean, I retired many, many years ago after being in the field of public health for 35 years. But this was something else. Finding information about my family, being able to tell the story. And I love telling stories. My mother told me she was the ultimate storyteller.
And now you're passing it to your granddaughter.
Passing it on.
Wow, this is so beautiful. And I just want to say that I am so happy the first show that we did, that you are the guest. The first show that I'm hosting, you are the first guest. And I'm more than sure that a lot of people have learned a lot, and if they look in their own genealogy and you start shaking that tree, you don't know what you're going to shake. You're going to shake land. Someone contacted me and told me that his grandfather owned a water well, and he was producing water. Well, he was bottling up water and selling water back in the days.
All right.
So now I have to go and just do a story on his grandfather. And when I read about it in the newspaper, I'm like, here, this man, he owned his own water company.
Mm-hmm.
So there's so much that we learn just from researching our own history.
That's right. And it's so rewarding though, because I mean I'm really into looking at the primary sources.
Yes.
And which means that I don't mind going to the courthouse. And we were at the courthouse. Yes. And digging into those records and seeing it firsthand and looking at who's saying what. That's what we have with the land entry papers. Mm-hmm. And don't Bernice, let those papers sit in the National Archives without you taking a look at them.
Don't let them sit another 100 years.
Not another 100 years. Absolutely not.
Bernice, some of the witnesses, I looked at those last names, and I know that you have been to Livingston Parish a lot. Are those surnames still a part of Livingston Parish, or have the people moved out and moved on to other places? Are those names still, like, was it Tinkerbell?
Tinkshell.
Tinkshell?
The Tinkshells moved on.
They moved on.
They moved on. You didn't see the Youngblood, but Peter Clark is connected to the Youngbloods because his wife is the Youngblood. So the Youngbloods are still there. They're in Hedda Island, and some of them are in Gonzales. But you do have the Baptiste. Of course, you have the Cyprians, you have the Broomfields. So you're going to find the Richardsons. You're going to still find some of those same names and those same people are still in the community.
Now, Bernice, you went back with your mother to that area?
Yes, I did. I certainly did. And I knew where she grew up. I just didn't realize how close it was to Marlborough. Really? Yes, it's very, very close. And so, I mean, it was just one of those trips down memory lane with my mother, who was so excited for me
she was just
to
giving
go
you
with
history. She was just talking to you all the way there about
all the way, telling me everything, even about the horse named Ted.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Wow. And so she left as a little girl from that area?
Yes. She left as a little girl because her grandmother did not want her to ever work in the field. She wanted her to get an education. And so they started off in St. Tammany Parish, actually in Madisonville, going to school, little private school, and then to New Orleans. And that's really where my mother grew up, in New Orleans. And hence, that's where I'm from, New Orleans.
Okay, so what is your next plan? What is your vision for 2022 with all of this amazing research and documentation of your research? What's your plans?
Well, my vision is for the descendants, especially those that are from the South, that we would compile, if you will, a set of essays in a book called The Black Homesteaders of the South. It would be a way of us documenting and sharing with others that, yes, there were Black homesteaders in Mississippi, Arkansas, Alabama, Florida, and Louisiana. And so that's my vision, to see not only will we have those stories on the National Park Service site, but we will have a companion book to go with it. And then once we get additional stories, because I'm still looking for stories from the Midwest, from the West, of course, from the Great Plains, then we'll move on and maybe have another book that would identify those homesteaders out of the Midwest. And
like a series of books.
Yes, just a series. But it's stories that have not been told. And it's bringing those stories forward so that even the historians that haven't really paid that much attention, and it may be very difficult.
Right.
But descendants can find each other. The place to look is in the genealogical community because these are the individuals that are searching.
Right.
And while we spend time looking at our history, we also take the documents, the historical documents, and we make sense out of them.
Right.
We have the context. We know it's the act of 1862, but we also take what we learned about that act and take it to the next level by telling the story. And that's what it's all about.
I have to disagree with people who think that genealogy is a hobby. It is a necessity. Genealogy helped me to learn a lot about the local history. And the local history is very important, because when you think about a child in school, they always learn about the national history, but what about the local history? There is a history there. And so it opened me up to learn so much about the region, the people. And so genealogy, and especially for people of African descent whose ancestors was enslaved, it's not a hobby. We're still searching for family members.
That's right.
We're still trying to learn about our family and every little bit of information we can collect. And so I can understand the excitement for any documentation that we can find that would tell us something about their lives prior to slavery or after slavery, for that matter.
Right. That's right. And especially, I mentioned to you Josiah Cyprian. Well, one of the things I learned about Josiah Cyprian is that he mentioned he grew up on the Henry Cooper plantation. I mean, he actually named it. And he talked about his life. And so this Civil War soldier became a homesteader. And you could just track his, you should see this file. I was just so excited. And I want the family members to know this. Some family members don't know. And this is a way of us sharing that information. And that's why I said, you don't have to be a descendant. You could be a contributor. You could just do your community genealogy and look at what will come forth. You don't have to just look at your family. Look at your community and study what's going on in your community.
And it's because I have studied community genealogy that I learned so much about my own family. And to look at, there's other people in the community that have photographs. That's people that have funeral programs, church programs, school programs. So just so much private organizations, associations, there is just so much that you will find if you just look beyond your own family.
Yes, you're right.
And Bernice, I want to thank you for being a guest on the segment of exploring this rich history in the Louisiana, Florida parishes. And for everybody that joined us tonight, thank you. It's a one-person operation, but we're bringing some good information. So Bernice, I thank you once again for being a guest. That hour went by so fast. Thank you for that very well-planned presentation, because I can tell that you really created that presentation just for the Louisiana, Florida parishes.
Well, thank you for inviting me. And look, I will prepare any community where we can, if we can get individuals to start searching and telling those stories.
That's right.
What it's all about.
And look, we are writing history and we're rewriting history.
That's right.
And we're telling our own story, our stories, our history, our legacy. Thank you all for joining. Thank you for being a guest, Bernice.
Thank you.